America's working class has been cheated. That is an assertion.
Open border coordinate.
That's a Koch brothers proposal.
Then the Democrats jumped right on board with the corporatists. They got in bed with Wall Street, military-industrial complex, the fossil fuels, Silicon Valley. And now look what happened to the country. We have the biggest income disparity since the Gilded Age. Bigger than that. There's more.
Expanded trade has thrown the working class into much more competition than they experienced before trade with lower wage countries took off.
Can say is that as a country, we have to make a different set of choices because the choices we've made have hurt working people.
Congressman, because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value.
Hello, and welcome to another Institute for Sound Public Policy podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Lynn. I'm also the executive director of the Institute, where we take a look at things like globalization, neoliberal policy, and how they impact working American men and women, in terms of the movement of people, the movement of capital, and the movement of goods, and how that's been playing out for the last 40 years. And we're also in the week of Monday was Earth Day. It's an opportunity for us to commemorate our relationship with the earth and the ecosystems upon which we depend. So it's really more than a privilege. And it's just a great opportunity to have Brian Czech come and talk to us here. And Brian is the founding president and now executive director of the Center for the Advancement of Steady State Economics. He served as the first conservation biologist in history of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service from 1999 to 2017. And concurrently as a visiting professor of natural resource economics in Virginia Tech's National Capital Region. He is the author of several books, including Supply Shock, Shoveling Fuel for a Runaway Train, and the Endangered Species Act, its history, conservation biology, and public policy, as well as over 50 academic journal articles. His primary contributions to ecological economics pertain to the trophic theory of money, the process of technological progress, and the political steady-state revolution. Brian is also a frequent speaker, moderator, commentator, and regular contributor to the Steady State Herald. He has a Bachelor of Science from the University of Wisconsin, a master's from the University of Washington, and a PhD from the University of Arizona. He's also been designated an Eco Champion by Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, an Eco Hero by Eco Hearth, and one of the top 100 inspirational leaders by the Post-Growth Institute. And in closing to this long introduction, I wanted to add the folks at Publishers Weekly compared Brian to Carl Sagan for his ability to popularize their difficult subject matters. And this is certainly going to be kind of difficult because it's complex. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Well, it's great to have you here. And this is going to be a very difficult subject. I almost hate to use the word unpack, but to make it relatable to policymakers and average working men and women around the world. So it's great to have you here, Brian. And I thought maybe we'd start off with, if you can give a kind of a broad stroke description of what a steady state economy is and its implications for us.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Well, a steady state economy is simply an economy with stabilized size. And what that entails then is a stabilized population and per capita production and consumption of goods and services, because the size of the economy is a matter of the amount of goods and services that are produced. And so that's measured with the metric called GDP, gross domestic product. And when that's stabilized, that means we're in a steady state economy. And there are more complex ways of looking at it, like instead of using GDP as the indicator, you might try to directly measure the throughput of energy and materials. But one thing we have found in our studies at CASSE is that GDP is an outstanding indicator of the size of the economy and its ecological footprint. In other words, the throughput of energy and material. So that's it in a nutshell, Kevin.
Wow. It's interesting because you brought up GDP. It's kind of a mad world. And I'm hearkening back to the late Kevin Phillips. He wrote a book called Bad Money. When you look at our economy, the US economy and GDP, roughly 20% of it is financial. It's banking, stocks and bonds, equities, real estate transactions, and only 10% of it is actually manufacturing. And that's a big shift from 50 years ago. How does a steady state economy, what would it do to correct an imbalance like that? Because there's that old adage, when Kevin Phillips wrote his book, Bad Money, there was that adage, the bad money chases out the good. How would steady state correct something like this? Because, right now it's believed there's almost $1 quadrillion in the global economy that are derivatives whose value is on the underlying asset, not on that financial value. I mean, it's crazy. And how would a steady state help correct something like that?
Well, I think it helps to have a basic understanding of national income accounting, how GDP is calculated. And so, it's the value of the final goods and services produced in a country annually. I mean, those are the standard sideboards annually within a country. But you can also look at global GDP. But it doesn't keep track or incorporate every transaction out there. Obviously, the intermediate goods and services, those are not included in GDP because remember, it's final goods and services. So it's the loaf of bread, but not the wheat and the salt that went into the loaf of bread. And it does not include all kinds of like stock market activity and derivatives. Those, we could view those as kind of a financial sideshow, not the real economy, which is measured with GDP. So at least we have that going for us.
Now, the current economy, everything is dependent on growth. And, we've used the term entropy from time to time. In fact, I'll pull up an interesting quote on just that. And this quote is from it was Daly, and he was talking about his professor Georgescu Rogan, and said that it's a matter of low entropy energy. You need matter and energy to accomplish your physical ends. But the first law of thermodynamics says that matter and energy can never be destroyed or created. You can change its form and process change that form from low entropy, useful energy to high entropy, useless energy. But ultimate means are constrained by the entropy law. But there is an ultimate end, and that's a harder answer. My question here is, it's really, you mentioned how it is really about the energy and the inputs. but we seem to, in this economy of ours, demand growth, ever increasing levels of growth year after year that require more inputs of capital, more inputs of natural resources, more people into the system. And I have to believe that ultimately this can't end well.
Well, it's not a belief; it's ecological fact. That's one of the fundamental concepts in the science of ecology: carrying capacity. Every species has a carrying capacity, and somehow economists they haven't studied the entire rest of the economy of nature. They've just studied that one species, Homo sapiens, and they look at the history of technological progress, and they think what's happened in the past is going to be the trajectory for the future. And no, it's not so. You absolutely have at the base of the economy those natural resources. And as Herman points out, yes, you have the entropy law that limits the degree of efficiency you can milk out of the economic production process. You're never going to get 100% efficient. That's the easiest way to put the entropy law into economic terms, economically relevant terms.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you take those first two laws of thermodynamics. You can't get something from nothing via the first law, neither matter nor energy, connected with E equals mc squared, and you can never get 100% efficient, even pursuant to the second law. So limits growth.
Right. And a lot of the reason I'm excited for you to be here today is I have this notion, and people like Chris Martenson and other talk of it, that you can't have unlimited growth on a planet with limited resources. And it just seems a steady state economy. Eventually, we're going to get there. We can either begin the deacceleration to get to a steady state economy, or it's just going to kind of hit us abruptly. What are your thoughts on that? And probably more to the point, what do economists and other naysayers get wrong when it comes to the notion of or theory of a steady state economy?
Well, there's a lot to unpack out of that one, but well, in ecology, there's two basic types of growth trajectories and two basic types of species with their population dynamics in terms of their population dynamics. There's the so-called K-selected species that grows exponentially, and then a certain inflection point is reached. The rate of growth slows, and then, kind of like you were alluding to earlier, the species tapers off in terms of its population somewhere around carrying capacity, which is denoted in ecology as K for carrying. So that's why it's called a K-selected species. But then there's the R-selected species, R for the rate of growth, and there's no inflection point. There's no tapering off around carrying capacity. Rather, the population grows exponentially until it breaches its carrying capacity, and then by definition must go down. And since it's an R-selected species that didn't adjust to its environment, it crashes. It's a collapse. And that's in terms of the population size. What sets Homo sapiens apart a little bit is that there is so much diversity in technology that you can't only consider population. You also have to consider the amount of per capita consumption. That's why GDP is the right metric to use in thinking about whether and hoping that we're going to be K-selected, or whether we're going to have the horror, the Malthusian type of scenario of an R-selected trajectory and collapse.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you create a steady state economy?
Well, that has to come from a lot of angles. The two main ones, I guess you would say, are public opinion and and behavior, public like consumer behavior, and then from the public sector, politically, you have to have the right policy, the policies that are congruent with a steady state economy. And I'll just give you one example. Right now, if we could identify anything as a central economic policy of the United States, it probably would be the Full Employment and Balanced Growth Act of 1978. And that's an act that literally mandated for a number of government agencies and the U.S. government in general to pursue the goal of GDP growth. So that's such a 20th century law, we might say. That needs to be amended in a very major way. That's one of the things we work at CASSE is a Steady State Economy Act. And in terms of the public policies involved, there's all kinds of fiscal and monetary and trade policy that goes into that. But, to keep it a little bit simpler, the very first order of business here, so to speak, is to have the right goal. So it should no longer be a full employment and balanced growth act. For a while, we were calling what we were working on the Full and Sustainable Employment Act. But we just started making it even simpler to understand. We simply call it the Steady State Economy Act now.
Mm-hmm. As I'd mentioned earlier on, if we focus on really three things here at the Institute, that's the movement of goods, capital, and people. I want to pull up a quote of yours, and in it you said, population trends are important to consider when interpreting GDP data. Consider what happens to national income when an increase in GDP results primarily from immigration of wage laborers. With the influx of these new consumers, cheaper labor, the income of businessmen, corporation, lenders, and especially landlords increases. This is offset, however, by a decline in income of the average wage laborer. Immigrants will work for lower wages than other laborers, especially at first, but wages are eventually driven down across the board. That's why labor unions often oppose liberal immigration policies. Meanwhile, despite how politically conservative big money or capital is, it favors liberal immigration laws as well as liberalized, unregulated trade. How does immigration factor into that? Because again, it just seems to be one of those additional inputs into the economy and GDP.
Right. Well, I mean, steady state economy, going back to our earliest bit, it's stabilized population times per capita production and consumption. And so the immigration variable comes in obviously on the population side, most directly on the population side. And so if you have a natural population growth rate of a country that's negative, and you want to sustain a stable population, then you want some level of immigration. If you have a population growth rate that's positive and you are getting serious about moving toward a steady state economy, you want to stabilize the size of that population. And some of that you can do with things like incentives in the tax code and other sorts of family planning and this and that. But if the immigration rate is unsustainable, you're not going to handle it without addressing that issue as well.
Right. Because it's interesting. I was back in Los Angeles for a week, and when I talk to people who have been there as many as 5 generations, they're going back with their families, immigration has impacted the landscape so much that it's almost like they're homesick for a place they've never left. Do aesthetics like that, do softer things also figure into a steady state economy where people can kind of look around and say, I'm walking down the same street that my great grandfather walked down, and how
Absolutely.
so?
Yeah, absolutely. At CASSE, we like to say that there is a fundamental conflict between economic growth and four main categories of things. The most obvious one, and where it all kind of starts out, is the conflict between economic growth and environmental protection.
Mm,
Well, you need a very sound and functional environment to have to sustain an economy. So, ironically, that means that there's a conflict also between economic growth and economic sustainability. You have to have a sustainable economy to support the goal of national security, which is integrally tied in with international stability. So now we've got this conflict between economic growth and environmental protection, economic sustainability, national security, and international stability. And what you're talking about, aesthetic properties, where does that fit in? It fits in certainly pertaining to those first two segments of this huge conflict complex, if you want to call it that, the environmental protection and the economic sustainability. You're not going to have nice green spaces. You're not going to have well kept towns and main streets if you are exceeding the limits to growth. So that's where the importance of heading toward a steady state economy in the 21st century comes in.
hmm And what do you think? Who are the critics of the steady state economy, and what do they get wrong about it in your eyes?
Well, I guess the main critics in a conceptual or academic sense are conventional economists, or as they're referred to, neoclassical economists. And what they uh, get wrong, or what they've overlooked, is that technological progress isn't manna from heaven.
Hmm.
Technological progress itself requires a tremendous amount of resources to conduct. Let's put it in terms of financial resources to start with. We're up to, I want to say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 billion a year of research and development
hmm
investment in the United States. That's a pretty significant chunk of GDP. Uh, and the, the economy is structured such that at the base is the agricultural and extractive activity. That's what supports the manufacturing activity, from the heaviest stuff to the lightest stuff like computer chips. And it also supports all the service industries, the service sectors, the so-called information economy even. It all starts out at that, we call it the trophic base, because in ecology you have trophic levels that go from the plants to the primary consumers to the predatory secondary consumers. And the human economy has the same, it follows the same laws of nature. You have to start with real producers. Those are the agricultural producers that feed everybody else. If that's not happening, none of that other activity is happening. So the money that is available for research and development is a function of how much surplus, agricultural and extractive surplus, there is at that trophic base of the economy. That's what we call the trophic theory of money. That
hmm
money is generated, I mean, real money, not, fiat money off a printing press or electrons out of a bank.
Right, not a click of a keyboard. Right, right.
Right. Real inflation adjusted money. We started using the term warranted money because that helps to distinguish the reference to the trophic theory of money, I guess. There's only so much money that's warranted in any given year by the level of agricultural and extractive, I keep saying kind of loosely extractive activity, but we're talking about, first of all, about other food producing sectors like fisheries, commercial fisheries primarily. But then there are closely related extractive sectors that provide, the food, clothing, and shelter that everyone must be set up with before they can go to work in any kind of other job. So it's logging, it's mining, obviously the energy sector is also at that trophic base. That's what fuels all of the other sectors in terms of industrial operations and stuff. But so that's what I meant by research and development, and then the technological progress coming from the R&D, the research and development. That's not
Okay.
manna from heaven. That required an expansion of that trophic base and therefore that environmental impact.
Interesting. Now, globalization, when you look back at the early 1990s, treaties like NAFTA, GATT, WTO just seemed to have put that on steroids. We pushed good manufacturing jobs that provided middle class incomes overseas. 3 million alone to China before the year 2000. And now, again, as I said earlier, only 10% of our economy is manufacturing based on something actually real and productive. I'd like to bring up a quote of yours concerning and get your thoughts on this, on globalization and neoliberalism and its impact on preventing us from getting to a steady state. So here's the quote I'd like to share with everyone. If you've ever been confused by the term neoliberal, now you shouldn't be. Neoliberals are free market social conservatives. They can't be called plain old liberals because that term has been reserved for those who see the need for government to play an active role in economic affairs, including international trade. The irony is that American neoliberals, who also promote American dominance in international affairs are then called neoconservatives. Remember Paul Wolfowitz? I'll have to share some stories about him from the 80s. For a neoliberal to be a neoconservative entails some tricky diplomacy. Brian, what is it with these overarching theories, neoliberalism, neoconservatism, this need to be the world's hegemon where, the dollar is, for now, the world's reserve currency, and we are able to extract a lot of power. I think back to that movie with Tom Cruise, where he's a sports agent and his client says, I'm not interested in the money, I'm interested in the Quan. So as this world hegemon, we're able to extract a lot more than just money from the world. We get to pretty much do what we want. Is that a big force that works against us getting to steady state?
Yeah, sure it is. The growth attitude, the growth ideology, the growth, the instinct, it's the program is very expansionist. It's very hegemonic. It doesn't necessarily have to be if there's planning for the future that recognizes a limit to growth. But in the 21st century, being hell bent on GDP growth, I agree. It practically comes with the turf of hegemonic America First, which again is ironic because a neoliberal attitude is quite laissez-faire. where, let the economy, the global economy in this case, operate as it will.
Right, you would think, because one of my issues when I was fighting NAFTA and GATT and the WTO was, wait a minute, if you want free trade, just go ahead and enact and trade freely, whatever you want. Why do you have to have a treaty? Why do you have to have it backed up by American force of arms, if need be?
Right, right. Yeah. The talk about free trade and free market is full of ironies and hypocrisy and misleading. It's rhetoric.
And then doesn't it all kind of come down then to consumerism? We were told these jobs didn't quote unquote have an economic right to exist, and in return we were going to get cheap goods. And we were sold on a bill of goods that, oh wow, learn to code. Although we found out with the H-1B visa program that, well, uh, the neoliberals have a plan for that to push Americans out of those high-paying jobs. But with regard to the American consumer, what should the message be when looking at the steady state? Because it seems now, if you want to protect the environment, they're telling you to buy something. Like, I drive a 2004 Subaru Legacy. I had the engine rebuilt in it rather than go off and buy a Prius or a Tesla because, I look at the economic footprint of those activities. But what's the message for the consumer, do you think?
Well, less is better. And so I don't want anybody to overreact to that. If you're living with a relatively low standard of living, then no, the onus is not on you to consume less. But for the economy at large, we're talking about trying to get to a steady state and get off that growth path. Uh, and furthermore, the fact that we may need some degrowth actually to get to a better level, an actual sustainable for the long term level of GDP, well, that all implies that for the propensity to consume, if you want to put it in Keynesian terms, the propensity to consume should decline some, and that we should recognize that we're in a day and age now whereby there's too much consumption. What is it now, about $103 trillion global economy.
Right.
And yeah, and that's the production on the one side of the coin, if you will, and the other side of that coin is the consumption. And that's too much. It's a planet in overshoot. The economy is in overshoot for the size of the planet. We know this from the decades worth of research that is conducted in measuring the ecological footprint of countries as well as their biocapacity. The footprint is too big for the long run capacity. And you might ask, well, how can we exceed that capacity? Maybe that was a faulty estimate of capacity. But this goes back to that R selected species thing. It's possible to breach carrying capacity temporarily. What you do is you sell out, you liquidate those stocks of natural capital and energy supplies and water, aquifers, and so on.
Right. To kind of the term, you eat your seed corn.
Yeah, you eat the seed corn, exactly. Yeah.
And isn't that what's going on? I mean, when you look at the sprawl, for instance, that supports all of this, because every realtor, every developer. Years ago, I was at a home builders conference, a luncheon in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was brilliant because the economist came up to give his thoughts, as he did every year. And he got up to the podium and he goes, turn off the projector. And he goes, do you realize you're excavating your own graves? And I was like, what? And he goes, I know the pressure from corporate. You did 80 units this year, you got to do 118 next year. But guys, build fewer homes, you'll make more money off of each home. But this demand for growth, and like you said, aren't we really? We're just getting into the things that we depend on for life overall. And what would you say? How are we able to do it specifically? How are we able to get away with it up till this point? Where people like myself, I did a interview with Bill Reese a while back and asked the question, was Malthus right? And people like myself, who are called Malthusians, were laughed at and said, see, everything's better. Everyone's wealthier. How do you counter something like that, Brian?
Well, Malthus may have been, first of all, a little bit premature in his estimates of when exactly limits to population growth would be reached. But remember, he wasn't talking about the global economy. As far as I recall, it's been a while since I read the essay on Principle of Population, but he was limited to his observations largely from England, and you could see at that point in history the rampant growth rate of population and industry, and ag land starting to get squeezed out, and awful polluted conditions in London and other big cities. And so his general thesis also probably was a bit premature about the futures that yet remained for technological progress, because he was writing it was still toward the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And there was a lot of one thing I guess that he may have overlooked in terms of a more global outlook was that there had been what we might call, or what one author did call, was his name Stannard. I forgot his first name, but Stannard wrote the book The American Holocaust, which was about the wiping out of Native American tribes, primarily by smallpox and some other infectious diseases, which left wide open for European immigrants to have a cornucopia for centuries worth of cornucopia in terms of natural resources. And so that type of availability of trophic surplus provided for many decades of very rapid technological progress, much of which was shared, with the UK, and there was plenty of complementary efforts in different parts of the world. So, but the basic point that there's a carrying capacity for population and its economy, it's not just Malthus, that's basic ecology.
Right. I'd also like to share another quote, because I'd like to talk about things like trade and everything and how that figures in. But you had mentioned earlier about poor countries versus wealthier countries. And I want to bring up a quote of yours, because one of the things when I was early on fighting NAFTA, and I was talking to a bunch of MBA students from Thunderbird MBA college in a business college in Phoenix, Arizona, and they're like, why would you deprive the rest of the world of, the opportunity to go through an industrial revolution and get to the consumerism that we have today? And here's the quote I'd like to share. Wealthy countries are and should be brought to account for excess per capita consumption. Likewise, overpopulated countries should be brought to account for excess demand on global resources. Many overpopulated and impoverished countries reject that change because Often their plight has been caused or exacerbated by the plundering of corporations and governments from wealthy countries. No doubt they have a point there. The closest thing to a compromise of accountability, then, would be for wealthy countries to shut down their borders in proportion to their slowing GDP growth. In other words, a wealthier country announcing and undertaking the transition to the steady state economy would be justified in shutting down its borders and supported in international diplomacy for doing so. On the other hand, for a wealthy country to shut down its borders while pursuing globalized trade and economic growth would appear greedy with poor immigrants at the door. That's because it would be greedy. Such a nation should be shunned by the international community, which in today's world is ultimately a threat to national security. Wow. Explain that to us, and that interplay between the developed world, the developing world, where we're going in terms of international trade and diplomacy.
Well, what you just read, and thank you for reading that, that's the stuff of what we might call steady statesmanship in international diplomacy. It's not a level playing field around the planet. We do have quite a few countries with dire poverty, and poverty that can't be fixed just by fixing government and redistributing wealth. There's real per capita needs that can't be met within the boundaries of some countries now. And meanwhile, we have some countries, and the USA is one, where the per capita consumption is unprecedented, like off the charts in terms of human history. So it seems to me that it's common sense that there needs to be a transition starting in the wealthy countries, and especially the relatively self-sufficient wealthy countries, toward that steady state economy. And then, as described in the quote, that provides the political the political rationale and the logic and the ethical rationale to not draconianly and not abruptly, not shockingly, but gradually shut down borders, and especially if the population is still growing as part of that GDP growth. But concurrently with that, there's a little bit that wasn't in that quote. We have developed some proposed legislation on that at CASSE, and we feel that there should be a what do we call it? The Aid in Place Fund. The USA needs to do this quickly enough so that it still has the means to help other countries because helping other countries in this context is helping ourselves as well. It's helping all concerned, ourselves and legitimately those other peoples from other countries and the global community. But this Aid in Place Fund would help make it so that there isn't such desperation in those parts of the world that it's causing the migrations to other parts of the world.
But isn't that, again, largely population driven? You have countries, for instance, India is a great example where they have an enormous population. Things are not going well. I just had two friends come back from India. One had been there almost a year, another one just a couple weeks. And they speak with the Indians, and all they want to do is leave, get out of there. And they want to come here. It's, how do we curb that? There's that, but I think we have to get perhaps, again, we have to look at immigration policy, go back to pre-1965 mindsets where it was like when my mother came here, it was highly restrictive and very well regulated. And again, population growth wasn't really, we didn't have large population growth swings. We, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we pretty much stabilize U.S. population in the early 1970s? And it's really immigration and the liberalization of immigration that has led to some 80-90% of our population growth.
Well, that last statement I believe is true. Yeah, that's the figures that I've seen as well. I don't know how close to stabilization it came in the 70s. I know there was a lot of talk about it. But I think that, and a lot of us recognize this, I think the key additional thing that we being CASSE, that we bring to the table is this concurrent adoption of the steady state economy as the macroeconomic goal. It just doesn't make sense otherwise, and it certainly looks, because it really is greedy in the sense of, when you think about the levels of poverty in other parts of the world. I like to remind people, we're not all just Americans. All Americans are citizens at a number of levels. We're citizens of a county, we're citizens of a state, we're citizens of the United States. But aren't we, in some sort of broader sense, a global citizen as well? Don't we take some pride in how the planet, in the condition that the planet's in, the planet, its atmosphere, its waters, its resources, its climate, and the people around the planet. Don't we love the diversity of Homo sapiens across the world? It seems like we should, like we ought to. There's so much to appreciate in all that. So that means then that if we want to get serious about tightening those borders, I think that only is appropriate when we are concurrently becoming serious about getting off that greedy growth path and heading toward a steady state economy.
Yeah. I'm reminded, I was just, while you were talking, thinking of a lecture that James Howard Kunstler, the author of several books on urbanism and resource depletion and urbanism in general. And he has said in his TED Talk, don't let people call you a consumer, you're a citizen. And it entails certain, not just rights, but also responsibilities. And isn't that kind of what you're driving at? It just seems with this whole neoliberal globalist outlook, they want us to be good consumers. And they don't want us to be, saying, no, I have certain set of responsibilities to not just my family, friends, but my community, to my state, to my country, things like that. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a part that could be revitalized? Is citizenship, can it be revitalized in a steady state economy?
Well, I sure hope so. And it may be a precondition, a prerequisite for getting to a steady state is revitalization of citizenship. It's kind of, it makes you wonder what's the chicken and the egg there. It's a chicken egg kind of thing. But I agree. One of my pet peeves is that concept of consumer confidence. Who the heck on Madison Avenue or whatever came up with that business? As if confidence should be something to be expressed in the realm of consumption.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing. Shouldn't we be thinking, what's the level of happiness, feelings of security, things like that, rather than, wow, I feel I can go out and buy that new refrigerator or that new car, whatever we're told that we need that we really don't. Was it the nuns would tell me when I was a kid, our wants are many, but our needs are few?
Right. Yeah. It's the citizenship that you're alluding to. I think it entails a little more, a deeper level of thinking and a more ethical plane to identify and move into, and a more spiritual attitude and psychology. And and these aren't areas that I'm any kind of an expert in, but one thing that I very much have appreciated, um, I don't know how much it's out there anymore, but there was kind of a movement for a while about caring for creation.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, the
And
idea
I'm
that,
seeing that a lot on the right, coming out of the religious right, where they're like, the Bible tells us to be good stewards of the planet, interestingly enough.
right. It's ironic. The whole right and left thing and conservative it's so confusing because, yeah,
Yes.
another one of my pet peeves is how the word conserve has been co-opted by, conservative. There's a lot of great things about being a true, what I might call a true conservative, including being a conservationist. But that flies right in the face of like the neoliberal, the rampant
Correct.
growth. Yeah, so it's a messed up rhetorical,
Yeah. You
political.
make me think of people, icons like Wendell Berry out there, who for decades has been talking. It amazes people. It's like he's a poet, he's an author, he's a farmer, and he understands, how we need to tread lightly on this earth. And, he's found a home among conservatives, interestingly enough. Uh, and also, you made me think of a fellow by the name of Trammell Crow. He puts on the biggest Earth Day event every year in Dallas, Texas. And he's a Republican and he's a conservative, because he wants to conserve. So he can have those conversations across the political divides and things like that. But it's interesting. I wanted, in the time remaining, uh, learn more about what you're doing in terms of policy to bring about the steady state, what that activity looks like. Are you active on the federal level, on the state levels, local levels? How does that play out, Brian?
Well, uh, we have two primary policy programs at CASSE at this time. Uh, One is our Steady State Economy Act program, and that entails, just like how it sounds, we're little by little developing this relatively comprehensive bill that would result in, if implemented, the transition off the growth path to a steady state economy. So that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the other main policy program that we have, we call it, and I think this will resonate with you and your conservative audience. Hopefully, it will resonate. It's called the Keep Our Counties Great campaign.
Oh, I
And
love it because so much happens at the county level and that local level. I look at California. The counties are really powerful in California. And where I'm living now in Pennsylvania, not so powerful. But there, I mean, the fact that Hilda Solis, who had been a congresswoman, Secretary of Labor, came back, ran for, and became a county supervisor in Los Angeles should tell you something on that level.
yeah,
But that's great. Please tell us more about that.
well, first I'll talk a little bit about the rhetoric there, or the slogan, the sloganeering. We call it the keep, and we literally italicize the word every time we use it. It's the Keep Our Counties Great campaign, because we're trying to send a message to the MAGA crowd out there that we don't necessarily sidle up to very much, because they're so hitched to the wagonry of Trump, who is the most pro growth politician perhaps ever. Trump would pull out all the stops for GDP growth. And that's obviously the opposite of what you and I are talking about, what we need to accomplish. So we're trying to send a message to the MAGA crowd. All right, there's something that's bothering you. What you used to think as being really great, there's something going awry with that. And if you're in a county and you look out the window and you like what you see, there's some great stuff out there yet. There's some woods, there's some pasture, there's a nice town, but there's a nice mix of natural and social elements. Why wouldn't you want to keep it that way? Of course you would want to keep it that way. And then ask yourself, what's changing it so fast? You can summarize it as the bulldozer. It's the bulldozer of GDP. It's bringing in the red lights. It's bringing in the traffic, the roads, the congestion, the noise. And population is a big part of that. But the goal of economic growth is kind of behind it all. And so if you want to keep that county great, then go to the commission meetings and start working on reforming your comprehensive plan, the county comprehensive plan, and get that thing off the growth path. You don't have to wait until the United States of America adopts a steady state economy. You can give it a good try at the county level, and there are a few counties that have come close to that ideal.
And you're absolutely spot on. And I can state from personal experience, here in the county of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, we are very involved in the 2030 plan. Now, the counties are weaker here and the municipalities stronger. So when we fight development, for instance, I'll give you an example. I'm on the steering committee of a group called Respect Farmland, a watchdog group for Lancaster County. And we are 4 out of 5 in terms of stopping development of farmland. That's what we focus on, because it's like, give us the infill, great. Because I couldn't complain when they built literally 3 feet, maybe 4 feet from where I live, a 13-story apartment complex, because I live in the city, but preserve the farmland. And you're right, because that level of activism gets heard. It requires conversations with the county, a review of the plans for infill and things like that. And it's an opportunity for citizens to say, look, this makes sense, this doesn't for us. And I love the way you said it, because if you can look outside your window and you like what you see, yeah, preserve that. And if you don't, it's probably because you and others weren't involved. Sometimes you got to have something worth fighting for. Years ago, I moved back to Pennsylvania after having been gone since 1980 and 2017. And I was asked by a group at a foundation, why did you move back to Pennsylvania? Why Lancaster? And I said, because it's something worth fighting for. For the first time in my life, all my travels, this is something I'd want to defend. And I think that message resonates very well with the Make America Great Again crowd. And they understand that globalization, all these, let's push GDP, it hasn't been working for them. Not when you're a wage earner, not when you're trying to, raise a family and keep it together. You can't do that in this economy. We have a few minutes left. There's one thing I'd like to talk to you. I just started reading this book by Yanis Varoufakis, Techno-Feudalism, What Killed Capitalism. And his notion is the cloud, the algorithms killed capitalism. The same way industrial technology like the railroad killed feudalism.
Oh, okay.
This is killing capitalism. And where do you see with, the Amazons of the world, the Facebooks, the Googles, their ability to mine the content from us, where, I had a friend who had a pretty successful dog products business, and Amazon destroyed it. He just couldn't be part of that model and make a living. I mean, where do you see And does this give you more reason to push the steady state economy? And how would a steady state economy respond to the cloud?
Yeah, that's the Amazon business, and first there was Walmart, and there was Microsoft, and
Right.
there was Amazon and Google. It's tough because there is the phenomenon called economies of scale, and you can have greater levels of efficiency, all else equal, when the size of the operation is big. But see, we don't want to be capitalizing upon economies of scale forever, because the scale itself is being breached, as we talked about. So Amazon's, and since they're already there, well, we have tough choices to make in a lot of cases as citizens and consumers. Do you go and pay, 20% more at a smaller business somewhere than when you could have just got it delivered to you a lot cheaper? Those are questions they're almost like microeconomic questions as much as macro. However, what I would like to weigh in on was this notion of the so-called information economy. I don't know if this author talks much about that, but the information economy dematerializing the economic process somehow. That was always the biggest farce. All that information gets used for is for all the regular old non-information sectors. If not, it wasn't relevant to economic and market activity, and it never got past the invisible hand, and it was meaningless for GDP growth. So that was a red herring that some people use to try to tap into the politics of green growth, that supreme oxymoron of green growth.
I've heard that before. I've heard it. Actually, I was laughing. I was at an event and former Congresswoman Jane Harman was using that term, like, oh my gosh, like clean coal, green growth. But yeah, I mean, the book really does talk about how, the algorithms now, they're able to replace the manager. So now workers work for an algorithm, and that algorithm is heartless. It's going to drive efficiency and eventually push them out. And in fact, it'll go to the point where it will simply not put a warehouse or something in a place where people might want to work collectively and organize and unionize, things like that. It's a brave new world, I'm afraid. Brian, how can people find you, learn more about the Center for the Advancement of a Steady State Economy, read your books, read your papers? How can they find you?
Well, we're at steadystate.org, and the menu will lead you to places like the Discover button will lead to places like the Steady State Press. We're a small book publisher, but we're interested in manuscripts. And you might be interested in this, Kevin. Maybe I shouldn't announce it prematurely, but we're very likely to be publishing quite a voluminous book about global demography.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'll keep you posted on that. If we get to that decision point, then I'd like to say more about it. Maybe get
Great. I'll have you back on the show when you're ready to go on the tour.
Okay, great. And we also have a weekly blog. It's called the Steady State Herald.
Mm-hmm.
And our banner is original journalism, real sustainability. So come have a look. We try to write it for people probably like a lot of your audience, smart people, but you don't have to be in school for mathematics and rocket science. We get it. We put it at a reading level that's digestible for a general and interested public.
Fantastic.
Yeah, steadystate.org. And while you're there, please consider signing our position on economic growth, recognizing the conflict between growth and those things we talked about and the need to move toward a steady state economy.
Yep, because again, we live in a democracy, a Republican democracy, and the numbers matter. So that's great. Well, uh, for our audience, thanks so much for staying with us this hour. This was a great conversation. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, be sure to hit that thumbs up. Also, make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you'll be alerted the next time we post a video like this. And make sure to go to our site, www.instituteforsoundpublicpolicy.org. Sign up for our bi-monthly newsletter. That's where, in case the algos take us down on YouTube or anywhere else, you have trouble finding us, you can always get our newsletter. Again, Brian Czech, Center for Advancement of the Steady State Economy. Thanks so much for joining me today. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Take care.